And welcome back to Law and Crime Now, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. Let's start right now with Johnny Depp's libel trial out in the UK. You might have heard about this one. He is suing the publisher of The Sun for an article that was published back in 2018 claiming that he was a wife beater, that he was physically violent with his ex Amber Heard. Now, not only does Depp vehemently deny any of these allegations, but he is claiming that he is the victim of abuse. Now, during the course of this trial, and it's been going on for several days, we are learning some frightening, I guess a good way to explain it, some frightening details about the couple. But before we even get into that, let's go back to when the audio recordings between Depp and Heard were released, and this one in particular is about, allegedly, a violent altercation. Take a look.
We gotta change how we do things, and I want to trust you, and I feel like all the trust is gone. All the fucking trust is gone in the relationship because you keep splitting.
I'm not gonna be in a physical fucking altercation with you.
Then don't.
You fucking hit me last night. You fucking...
What about all the other times you split? Come on, you cannot act like that's about that. It's not.
Well, on a plane, I can't split.
No, and you hit back, so don't act like you don't fucking participate.
I pushed you.
I'm not going to get into the details of that fight. You and I both know that you split when there is no physical violence involved. And that you do it like at the very beginning of fights these days. And if you split and you go into a different room and you don't actually leave that house, it does nothing but perpetuate the fight. Really, when you split on me, how do you feel when I leave you?
When I split, when I go into the other room, you say.
And getting me a room, getting another room at a hotel is just the same thing.
When did I get another room at a hotel?
You text Steven or Nathan in Toronto to get you another room.
All right, let's go to my all-star lineup for this evening. Joining me is Law and Crime's own Terri Austin, criminal defense attorney Imran Ansari, and attorney and legal journalist Joy Lim Nakrin. It's great to have everybody here. Imran, want to start with you. You know, he's been on the stand for a few days, and he's been subject to cross-examination. The big question, is he winning right now? Because, yeah, we're going to talk about some of the explosive details that came forward. But, you know, when you're looking at this, is he winning this case?
Well, you know, listen, this is something which is definitely catching the headlines. All the sordid details of their relationship is sort of being put forth in court and across the world in the press. Now, for defamation, truth is an absolute defense. It's the ultimate defense and the end-all defense to defamation. So what the Sun is trying to do here is show that Johnny Depp was an abusive husband. Is he winning? Well, I think with this recording, it's not conclusive, and I don't think we have any conclusive evidence yet on the record that Johnny Depp actually was physically violent with Amber Heard. We're hearing about all these juicy fights.
I will say he did admit to, I guess, accidentally headbutting her. And Joy, I want to turn to you because here's the problem that I have with this. If this whole case is about to restore his reputation, and that's really what a big part of this is, there's so much dark stuff coming out of this case, from everything from, like I just said, to him allegedly headbutting Amber Heard, to what we heard yesterday, that either Amber Heard or her friend allegedly defecated on their bed, that he supplied his then 13-year-old daughter with marijuana, that, you know, you're listening to this. Is this trial, whatever the result may be, is it going to end up hurting Johnny Depp and his reputation? Maybe if even he didn't sue the Sun in the first place, or the Sun's publisher?
That's a really valid question. And I guess his hope would be just that in what he sees as defending himself, he's going to provide some context to all of this, because although Heard is claiming that Depp abused her, Depp is saying, hey, look, I was actually defending myself. And we have seen accusations against Heard in the past. I believe it was 2009. She was charged with assaulting her girlfriend at the time. So I guess Johnny Depp's theory and the theory of his legal team would likely be, look, we've got to provide some context to all of this. And hopefully that's the way to restore his reputation in their minds.
At the very least, it's such an ugly relationship. I want to play another portion of this recording where, as I said, Depp says that he is the victim. And if you look at social media, there's a giant following in support of Johnny Depp that he shouldn't be having to answer for anything. He did nothing wrong. Listen to this back and forth between him and Amber Heard.
You don't even know what you're talking about. You still haven't even told me what it is, but run with it.
I have told you what it is.
No, you haven't.
I said to Travis, I said to you, hey, tell Travis what just happened.
You told me to do it. You told me to. You said, go do that.
I said, no, tell him what just happened.
And I lied.
And that you punched me in the fucking thing. And you
figured
in the
it out.
face. And you said, no, fucking, no, I didn't. What the fuck are you talking about? And I watched you lie. And then
I didn't punch you,
and
by the way. I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. It was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched.
Don't tell me what it feels like to be punched.
You know, even a lot of fights been around a long time. I know. Yeah,
no, when you fucking have a closed fist.
You get punched. You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not fucking deck you. I fucking was hitting you.
You can't
I don't know
deck
what the motion of my actual hand was, but you're fine. I did not hurt you. I did not punch you. I was hitting you.
How are your toes?
What am I supposed to do? Do this?
How are your toes?
I'm not sitting here bitching about it, am I? You are.
Oh,
that's the difference between me and you. You're a fucking baby.
Because you start physical fights?
You're such a baby!
Because
Grow the fuck up,
Because you start
Johnny.
Physical fights?
I did start a physical fight.
Yeah, you did, so I had to get the fuck out of there.
Yes, you did. So you did the right thing, the big thing. You know what? You are admirable. Every single time. What's your excuse? When there's not a physical fight, then what's the excuse there? You're still being admirable, right? Just by running away? And you can sit here and call me names, but you get called a name, and what do? That's the last insult. You're a baby. You're a hypocrite. You don't do anything that you actually do. You expect from people what you can't give them.
All right, Terry, over to you. As I said, there's been a big online support for Johnny Depp in light of these kind of recordings coming out and things that we're hearing that he is the one being abused. And I know that we're showing these photos of him allegedly abusing her and her allegedly abusing him. How is this going to play into this case when you hear these kinds of things? I mean, she just said, I'm not hitting you, I'm not punching you, I'm hitting you. I don't really know what the difference is, but when we're talking about this legal case, how's that going to factor in?
You know, I think the reason you see so many people following him is because he's a huge star. He's been in so many movies, Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, he's someone that people really like. And when they listen to these videos, it does seem as though Amber is the one who's instigating. It certainly is a very volatile relationship. She admits in that piece that we just heard that she started it. So, you know, I think there is some sympathy for him. The only thing I will say, though, is he is the one who's brought these actions. So he is the one who's showing the world what's going on inside of their marriage.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Imran, is it easier to prove and win a libel case in the UK than it is in the US? That's my first part. And then the second part, he still has a $50 million defamation lawsuit against Amber Heard here in the US that's going to be heard next year. So my question is, A, is it easier to win in the UK? And if he wins in the UK, how will that might affect the case in the United States against Amber Heard?
Well, the law of libel and defamation is essentially a common law tort. So we here in the United States get our common law from the UK. So the law is very similar both in the UK and the US. Essentially, truth is an absolute defense to a claim of defamation. So Johnny Depp will have to show that the falsity, essentially, of being called a wife beater. And how do you do that? Well, that's where you bring in this whole underlying case. So all the sort of details of their relationship, of these allegations of abuse will have to come out. Essentially, the son will have to show that Johnny Depp is, in fact, a wife beater if they are going to prevail on their defense. How it's going to come out and how it's going to play out on the defamation case here in the United States against Amber Heard, well, the determination in that court is clearly going to have some bearing on what's going to happen here in the United States. So if those allegations of abuse are found to be false in the UK case, it's going to have some comport, obviously, in what's going to happen here in the States. Again, a defamation case, the law of defamation, common law, both in the States and the UK, very similar.
I know it's not easy. And Joy, we have about 30 seconds left. We believe that some of his exes, Johnny Depp's exes, are going to testify on his behalf, including Winona Ryder, presumably to say that he doesn't get physically violent. How's that going to play out?
I mean, not only Winona Ryder, who of course has her own following and a lot of credibility for that reason, and Vanessa Paradis as well. I mean, the fact that he has invited his exes to testify as to his history and his character, and basically claim, hey, he's not a wife beater, I think is going to be very favorable for him.
This trial can't get more star-studded, more ridiculous. The things that we're hearing are quite strange, and we will continue to follow it. But when we come back, we have to focus on a major case here in the United States. New video and audio has been released in the Breonna Taylor case. We'll be back. Welcome back, everybody. On to Breonna Taylor, who was the EMT out of Louisville, Kentucky, who was killed by police after they executed a no-knock search warrant. And this has become highly controversial because they believed that there were drug operations going on in the apartment, even though there was no evidence to ultimately support that. Now, new audio and video has been released. First, we're going to get into the audio. This is from police interviews that were conducted with Kenneth Walker, who's Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, and he opened fire on the officers. He was originally charged with attempted murder. That charge was dropped. And you're going to hear from Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, who was the one that was shot by Taylor, who was shot by Kenneth Walker, and he led the team into that apartment. Now, a little bit later, we're also going to show you video of the moments after this shooting that led into Walker's arrest. But first, let's get into the Walker interview, and I want you to listen very carefully to how he describes the moments before police knocked in the door.
So it's a loud boom at the door. First thing she said was, "Who is it?" No response. So we like, what the heck? We both get up, start putting on clothes. Another knock at the door. She's like, "Who is it?" Loud at the top of her lungs. No response. So I'm like, what the heck? So then I grab my gun, which is legal. Like, I'm licensed to carry everything. I've never even fired my gun outside of a range. I'm scared to death. So she says that there's another knock at the door. She's yelling at the top of her lungs, and I am too at this point. Who is it? No answer, no response, no anything. So we like, what the heck? We both just see what I have on. Grab the nearest thing. These aren't even mine. These are hers. Like, so we both are just putting on something to go answer the door and see who's knocking at the door. This late at night. So when we come out, when we get out of the bed or whatever, like walking towards the door, the door comes like off the hinges. So I just let off one shot. Like, I still can't see who it is or anything. So now the door's like flying open. I let off one shot, and then all of a sudden there's a whole lot of shots. And like, we both just dropped to the ground, and the gun like fell like right over there. And I like kicked it because I'm like scared to death. Like, now we're seeing lights and stuff. So it's looking like, okay, it's the police, and there's a lot of yelling and stuff. So there's just shooting, and like, we're both on the ground, and then when all the shots stop, I'm like panicking. She's right there on the ground, like bleeding, and yeah.
Terry, I want to start with you because Mattingly says that police did knock a bunch of times. We have this differing account here on whether police ultimately identified themselves. He said that they did. Mattingly said that they did identify themselves multiple times. But what you just heard from Walker was a completely different story. How do you view these two differing accounts?
You know, here's what I'll say about that. When we hear Walker, it is immediately after the event. So when that happens, it's far more credible than when Mattingly was interviewed 2 weeks later with his lawyer, having already spoken to the union, knowing exactly what he should say. So if we have a discrepancy in what occurred at this point in time, based on the evidence that we've seen thus far, I'm leaning in favor of Kenneth Walker. I believe that they knocked and they rammed because they both said that. But as far as what was said, I don't believe that the police in any way, shape, or form identified themselves. And that's why we ended up in this situation.
Imran, Walker apparently said that when he was being driven, when he was apprehended, one of the officers said, "I just wanted to let you know right now we had a misunderstanding." And Walker had said, "It seems like to me they realized they were at the wrong place." What do you think about that?
Well, in my opinion, that's an admission. And that evidence coming into court, if this is going to, in fact, get into a courtroom, would be very probative. It would be showing that the officers have made an admission that they made a mistake. They were at the wrong location, perhaps. They acted on a no-knock warrant in a manner which led to, unfortunately, someone's death. And I think there's going to be really credibility issues with the officers if they're going to now come into court and give a different story. So again, a credibility determination is going to have to be made. And I think this really brings into question a credibility issue if they come into court and say something else.
Remember, none of the officers have been criminally charged here. And I want to go now to Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly. Again, he was interviewed, as Terri said, 2 weeks later after the shooting, after he got out of the hospital. He had an attorney present. Walker, by all accounts, did not have an attorney. He was interviewed the night of the shooting. So listen to what happens, how he describes after the officers ultimately knocked in the door.
At that point, Lieutenant Hoover said, "Go ahead and hit it." So I looked at Mike and said, "Go ahead." So he hits the first time, and it hits right on the door handle and didn't move the door. And every time he hits, people are announcing, "Please search warrant, please search warrant." Second time he hits the good spot, and it almost knocks the door open. I could see the deadbolt at an angle, and I could see a crack in the door leading into the apartment. So I said, "This one's going to go." So he hit the third time, and as soon as he hit, the door came open. They're yelling, "Please search warrant, please search warrant." I go around the corner. I clear the living room on the right-hand side where you can see the sliding glass door. As I turn the corner, as soon as I cleared the threshold of the front door, I could see down the hallway. Your mind works so quick in this situation, it's unreal. Because as soon as I cleared it, I'm face on about probably 20 feet away, right down the hallway. There's a bedroom door on the right, and there's the male and a female. The male's closest to the door, so he's to my right. And as I turn the doorway, he's in a stretched out position with his hands with a gun, and as soon as I clear, he fires. Boom. And it was almost like at the shooting range where two things flip at the same time, and you got to shoot, no shoot. But I mean, they were like shoulder to shoulder. My mind's going, "This ain't right. Something's off here." Because all the doors I've made entry in, I've never seen this. And so I hit this corner, and it goes boom. And as soon as the shot hit, I could feel the heat in my leg. And so I just returned fire. I got 4 rounds off, and it was like simultaneous. It's boom, 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 boom. And then I went back and went down on the side of the door, and then reached around, and I think I got 2 more off around the corner of the door. And then I could really feel the blood in my leg, so I reached down and felt it, and my hand was full of blood, and I knew it had hit my femoral at that point.
Joy, when you listen to this, do you think one of the things that maybe prosecutors are wrestling with, and one of the reasons why we haven't seen any criminal charges levied against the officers, is because this might be a situation of a tragic mistake on both sides, where both sides believed the other was a credible and legitimate danger? Breonna Taylor was gunned down, Mattingly was shot, and we're dealing with that situation. Or do you think it's just a matter of time before we do see criminal charges and we see allegations that there was a cover-up here and a planned story to try to change this narrative? Because clearly at this point, and people are confused as to why there's a delay, I guess, in the investigation or delay into the filing of criminal charges, we haven't seen it. So what do you think's going on, Joy?
I think the former scenario that you laid out is entirely plausible. You know, let's not forget that this was the middle of the night. This was after midnight. It's very likely, you know, that Taylor and Walker were asleep. And even though Sergeant Mattingly is claiming that he and his team knocked 7 or 8 times, not just individual times, but blocks of time, it is entirely possible that these two people being asleep and being used to ambient noise in a building, you know, an apartment building where there are other people, may not have heard all of that. It's also entirely possible that the officers announced themselves, and again, the occupants didn't hear that. So, you know, it's a very complex case, and I think that's why we saw, you know, legislators in Kentucky now debate whether they should even have no-knock warrants in the first place, and they're currently considering legislation to ban most no-knock warrants because, as we're seeing, the situation is so problematic.
Terri, Mattingly apparently said that they thought that Taylor would be alone in the apartment, that this was a soft target. And I assume that could be crafted into an argument that they were shocked when there was gunfire returned and they didn't know what was going on. So is that going to help their case?
Work against them, because saying that it was a soft target, that she was the only one there, she doesn't have a gun, she's a woman, she's a smaller stature, they could have just knocked on the door and announced themselves. I think they're contradicting their actions by saying it was a soft warrant and saying that it was a soft situation, because they didn't handle it as though it were a soft situation. They handled it as though they were knocking down a door of a, you know, suspect and a criminal and all kinds of drugs and ammunition. So saying that it was a soft target and actually acting in a different way, right, I think could hurt them.
Well, look, I want to talk a lot more about Taylor, because when we come back, as I said, we have to show you this new video that was posted by Breonna Taylor's sister on Facebook that shows the moments after the shooting. We'll be right back, right after this. Welcome back, everyone. We want to continue talking about Breonna Taylor. Again, the EMT who was gunned down by police in her own home, believing that her apartment was used for drug operations, even though there was no paraphernalia found, there was no illegal activity conducted, highly controversial move, and none of the officers have been criminally charged. Well, let's turn to some new video that was released this week. And Janiyah Palmer, who is Breonna Taylor's sister, posted this video on her Facebook. Now, she didn't, it's hard to say she didn't take this video. It was actually a video recorded by one of the neighbors of Breonna Taylor. But it was posted by Palmer nonetheless. Listen very carefully. So these are the moments, again, after the shooting when Kenneth Walker, Taylor's boyfriend, was arrested.
I heard, bro. What the fuck, dog? They done shot the fucking police. They got SWAT out this motherfucker and everything. Dog.
Come outside. Tack 3, everyone. Tack 3. Tack 3. Come walk back. Walk to me. Brent, you will go hands on. I'll talk. Keep your gun on him. Turn around, face away. Turn around, face away. Turn around and face away. Give me one patrolman to my left.
What's going down out here, dog? Sing fucking Africans.
Keep walking backwards, sir.
Somebody said keep recording. This is crazy.
You've been hit by a bullet.
Oh, she's crazy. Where's he at? I won't see him.
Now, once you get down on one knee on your...
He is out there.
Keep walking back. Look backwards.
They were hitting.
Look at the dog. That's the dog back there. Yeah, they'll get the dog to bite him.
Keep walking backwards, sir, to the step. You know what you step in? We can go right from here.
They keep on saying, get his right fucking head. All they know is he shot Law.
Look at the dog.
Hey, y'all know this is going to be on news.
Yes, this is right be on the news. Look at all the police out there.
All shooting.
Oh, they got the dog.
Nigga, because if he do anything, they're going to take that motherfucker and go off on him. Are you lying?
No.
One more step, sir. Now I need you to walk back between these two vehicles.
You don't got my ass, nigga. You the shot.
Keep coming back, sir. Keep walking backward.
He gonna keep hollering. I'm scared. Nigga, you sure?
Oh, look at the dog.
I can't see him. Look, he gonna keep hollering. I'm scared. They gonna let that dog go through the gate.
Ooh, that dog like.
Walk back to me. Keep on walking. Walk now.
He gonna say I'm trying. Move.
I'm trying. Watch out.
Is that the dude that be in the Charger? He be in that black Charger.
Yes, it is him.
Is that the one that lived under in the black Charger and stuff? He never seen photo.
Dang, they got him, y'all. Dang, y'all, he's going out of her now. They really got the SWAT at her and everything. It's going down.
Now, Taylor's sister, who posted this on Facebook, she said, okay, since the police only wanted to share a small clip of what really happened in those moments, I'm going to share the full clip. Let's talk about how Kenny, meaning Kenneth Walker, is following orders, but literally every officer has their guns pointed at him. Racism is really spelt LMPD. Imran, how do you view what we just watched?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a response in force. You have to keep in mind during this situation, we just had shots fired by officers to Breonna Taylor inside that apartment, and also shots fired at the officers. The response here is excessive, but it's a violent situation. So we're seeing what I believe, I'm a former prosecutor, I've spent a lot of time with the police here, and this looks to me like a typical response by police when shots have fired. I'm not saying, the actions were correct, what followed or what occurred before, but the response we see when you hear that shots are fired and an officer is down and there's also a civilian who has been hit, you would tend to see a response like this. Now, I have to say that although criminal charges have yet to be filed against the police officers, we do know that the family of Breonna Taylor have filed a civil lawsuit. So everything we see, let's just say the special investigation yields no criminal charges against these officers. All the actions by the officers and what occurred in that apartment and before and after will be litigated in some respect, and sworn testimony taken, discovery had, and the public will get to see exactly what happened through that civil lawsuit if there are no criminal charges.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Joy. That lawsuit has brought a lot of attention because the Breonna Taylor's family's attorneys have said that the police were so aggressive in doing this to try to track down Jamarcus Glover, who that was basically they were trying to find, this associate of Breonna Taylor, somebody that she had a past relationship with, and he was ultimately apprehended in a sideway, but that they were so aggressive. And they accused the city of the police department of doing this because of a redevelopment project. That this area where Glover was participating in, where he held these houses, it got in the way of this redevelopment project. And this real estate project is why they acted so aggressively and tried to get this warrant. The mayor has come forward and called these accusations outrageous. I guess my question is, as Imran says, if we don't see criminal charges, really, where is this case going to go next? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, well, so obviously those are some very loaded claims, and they're quite literally fighting City Hall. If you've got the mayor speaking out against this and so forth, but
right.
I think to be sympathetic to the family, of course, the exploration of wrongful death charges would be valid, and they have called for the release of body camera footage. And of course, as we've heard, there are huge discrepancies in the audio release through the internal investigations, and then the what's revealed through the 911 call that was released just a few weeks ago, and then you've got now this new video from the neighbor. So there are just so many pieces that are still unclear here. Obviously, it's going to be tough to prove the claims that the family is now launching. But to that end, it's reasonable then their call for the body camera footage to be released.
Look, this is a case that we're going to continue to follow. And before we just move on, I do want to share one thing. This was another portion of Kenneth Walker's police interview that was released. You talk about the fear. Listen to what he said was going on in his mind, what he was being told after the shooting.
My officer told me I was going to jail for the rest of my life. I don't know which one it was. And they said it was going to let the dog on me and all types of stuff just happened. Just in the bed.
Who was that? Do you know? Can you describe him to me?
Don't know. There's a lot going on.
No, I understand. And I'm sorry. I just,
so many police.
yeah, I just don't like when people do that. Yeah.
They had the dog right there, right behind me, barking. I'm out there with no shoes on, clearly nothing, walking in water and stuff, backwards. And he's like, I'm going to let this dog on you and you're going to jail for the rest of your life. And I'm like, clearly you can look at my record. I won't even get in trouble. I'm not violent or anything, so.
Yeah. Was it do you know if it was an officer in uniform?
Yeah, it was definitely an officer in uniform. It was the first one I came in contact with.
Well, they have like body cameras and stuff like that. Okay, and we have ways of doing that, stuff like that, and we'll watch the majority of the body camera.
And he asked me, were you hit by any bullets? I said no. He said, that's unfortunate.
Okay. Yeah, that's not...
Exact words.
Yeah, that's not appropriate then.
Now, as we said, the murder charge, or the attempted murder charge, I should say, was ultimately dropped against Kenneth Walker. And again, this is a case that we'll continue to follow. But I want to switch gears and focus on another major case, George Floyd. Now, there are some updates we have to talk about. And again, this is the man who died after that controversial police arrest, clearly in the news. But what we have just seen is the release of the transcripts of the body cam video of the officers. So let's look at some of these excerpts because this is really important. The first one, as we're putting up right now, as you can see, George Floyd is saying, I can't choke, I can't breathe. He really is expressing here the idea that he's struggling. And it's important to note where he says, I want to lay on the ground, I'm going down, going down. Now, that's important because ultimately, and if we go to the next one, let's go to the next screen, they ultimately comply with this request. And they say, we're going to take you out. They take him out of the car, they put him to the ground, and there's a thank you, just lay him on the ground. But clearly, he can't breathe. Now, it should be noted, he has said in these transcripts over 20 times that he can't breathe. Let's go to the next one because this is important as well. He says, I'm through, I'm claustrophobic, my stomach hurts, my neck hurts, everything hurts, I need some water or something. Listen to what Derek Chauvin, who is the officer who is most charged here, charged with murder, then stop talking, stop yelling. You're going to kill me, man. Then stop talking, stop yelling. It takes a heck of a lot of oxygen to talk. Okay, let's go to the next one. It wasn't just Chauvin who said this because listen to what the other officers said when Floyd said, I can't breathe. Officer J. Alexander Kung, you're fine. You're talking fine. Officer Thomas Lane, you're talking. Deep breath. Officer Tao, relax. Clearly all on the same page that they feel that he can breathe and maybe wasn't being honest. Even Officer Lane says he's got to be on something, meaning some kind of drug. Now let's go to the last one I picked out here. Officer Lane says, should we roll him on his side? Chauvin says no. He's staying put where we got him. Okay, I'm worried about excited delirium or whatever. Well, that's why we got the ambulance coming. Okay, I suppose. Let me come back to my panel here. Okay, Terry, let me ask you this. You're reading this. Does this help the officers in any way? Because in a sense that they really know he couldn't breathe. And does it help at least Thomas Lane, who is trying to say he tried to get Chauvin off of the neck of George Floyd?
Well, these comments are definitely going to hurt Chauvin, and they might help Lane because it does show that he's trying in some way, shape, or form to listen to what George Floyd is saying. He's trying to say to Chauvin, look, maybe we should turn him over. Maybe we should stop and help him. You know, he actually, at the end of the day, ends up calling the ambulance. So it could very well help him. Here's the issue, though, Jesse. He has been trained, and when I say he, I mean Lane, and he could have stopped Chauvin, but he did not. So I think listening to this tape at the end of the day is going to hurt all of the officers involved in this crime.
Well, let me ask you, Imran, do you agree with that? Because Thomas Lane's attorney, Earl Gray, has said he wants the body cam footage to be released. He wants the public to see it. He's filed a motion to dismiss the charges. It seems that they feel this tape will help his client. What do you think?
Well, his attorney, Earl Gray, is really going on the point that Lane was a rookie. I think he was on the job maybe 4 days before the incident happened. And they're really trying to shift the blame here to the senior officer on the scene, and that's Derek Chauvin. So I think it's going to be effective for Lane to some extent. I mean, there's looking at this transcript, the body cam footage that we expect to see. Right. I don't think it's going to help any of these officers. But if you're going to make the argument that Derek Chauvin was the senior officer,
I'm curious to see. I have a feeling in the next few weeks we may see this body cam footage. And I know we have to hit a break real quick. So, Joy, I want to ask you one question, about 40 seconds. The gag order the judge put, no attorneys, no one here can talk about this case publicly after 2 attorneys spoke with, I believe, the Star Tribune. Your thoughts on that gag order?
Well, of course, we don't want juries to be prejudiced, but at this point, who doesn't know something about the George Floyd case? And so I think you also have to balance the fact that the public interest is important here. You know, we're developing as a society new policy, police reforms based on what we've learned about this case. And I think it's important for the public to learn as much as possible about the case. And again, I go back to the point of these juries are probably already exposed to some sort of media about this case anyway. So if you're going to tell me the truth, tell me the whole truth.
It'd be impossible not to. Even if you're living on a rock, I'm sure you've heard about what's happening here. Now, having said that, we're going to take a break. When we come back, 2 other huge cases. Ghislaine Maxwell, Vanessa Guillen. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back. We're going to move now to Vanessa Guillen. This is the Army specialist whose remains were discovered about 20 miles from Fort Hood, where she disappeared in April. Now, her family sat down with ABC7 to give their first interview since the remains were confirmed to be those of Guillen. And what you're about to hear is them asking for a congressional investigation into the handling of Vanessa's disappearance, because there's been a lot of criticism here. And especially, they say, just because Vanessa Guillen's purported killer, who's specialist Aaron Robinson, he killed himself, just because that happened doesn't mean the story's over. Take a listen.
We cannot let this happen again. We cannot just, oh, okay, the man killed himself, but my sister was taken away. It could have been your sister, your friend.
Have you been able to process what happened?
No. I still can't accept it, to be honest with you. It's been really, like, I'm dreaming and I just don't accept it.
Joy, I'd like to start with you here, partly because I've been cutting you off so much. But here, the really important question is, we don't know why Guillen died. There's been allegations that she was sexually harassed. There's been criticisms that no one took this investigation into her disappearance seriously. Will there be a congressional investigation? Do you think the DOD's Inspector General is going to open up an independent probe into this? Because I know a lot of legislators are pushing for that. And at this point, the Army Secretary, Ryan McCarthy, has ordered an independent review to see what's going on. But what about Congress, and what about the DOD at this point?
Jesse, first of all, I have to say you're always polite. You never cut anyone off. But second of all, yeah, I mean, I do think absolutely that those are likely possibilities. You know, we've seen the tremendous public pressure for further inquiry into this with the hashtag #IamVanessaGuillen, because this is larger than the sad loss of this particular woman's life. You touched on some of the issues there that are underlying all of this. You know, is there this culture that allows for sexual harassment and sexual assault among the military women in the service? So there are some deeper questions there. And when we heard from that grieving mom say, you know, I want Congress to look into this, you know, and the sister say, quote, this could happen again. I mean, those are the questions. Yes, Robinson, her purported killer, is dead, but the issue certainly is not.
And Cecily Aguilar, who was apparently the girlfriend of Robinson, she has been arrested and charged with a conspiracy count, tamper with evidence. She appeared in court. Clearly, her account is what investigators are using to tie the pieces together. We'll see what goes on with her case. But again, we will see more of what happens into the investigation of the handling of her disappearance. Finally, tonight, have to move on to arguably the largest legal story we have in the United States right now. Ghislaine Maxwell. This is, of course, Jeffrey Epstein's associate who was arrested, charged, and she's currently in federal lockup on child sex trafficking and perjury charges. And we always have a new update when it comes to her. Before we even get to that, and there's some things we do have to talk about, the acting U.S. attorney, Audrey Strauss, who spoke during the press conference upon Ghislaine Maxwell's arrest, had this to say about possible bail conditions because Ghislaine Maxwell has an upcoming bail hearing on the 14th. Here's what the U.S. attorney had to say.
We will be seeking detention, and we are sensitive to that concern, and certainly will be in dialogue with the Bureau of Prisons about it.
The perjury charges, do you think that will undermine her ability to use her testimony against co-conspirators, i.e. if she were willing to testify against others? Doesn't that undermine that? What's your thinking about it?
This sometimes happens where there are perjury charges, and people can go on from there and become cooperators, if that's what you're asking. So I'm not concerned about that. In the event that she were to become a cooperator, I think that we can deal with that.
Okay, Imran, I want to start with you because I've been cutting you off as well throughout the whole show. Now, I don't know if you had an opportunity to see this, but Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys had a filing today where they said, look, she should be granted bail, and I'll tell you why. Ghislaine Maxwell is not Jeffrey Epstein. They said she did not flee, but rather left the public eye for the entirely understandable purpose of protecting herself and those close to her from the crush of media and online attention and its very real harms. Those close to her have suffered the loss of jobs, work opportunities, and reputational damage simply for knowing her. Do you buy that, Imran? And will this argument ultimately work at her bail hearing?
I don't think that Ghislaine Maxwell is going to be granted bail. I think she'll stay on remand. I think this case is too important to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Southern District of New York, to let it go without a fight. And I think they're going to fight that bail application in court. And I expect that a judge in the SDNY will deny the bail request. I think there's too many sort of surrounding things with the Ghislaine Maxwell arrest, and it's just too much of a risk to allow her to be on bail. She is a possible flight risk. She is someone with a lot of international connections, and I think that they're going to err on the side of caution, and I'm talking about the SDNY, the judge, and deny the bail application.
So, Imran, you talked about how important she is. Terri, she may claim, or her attorneys might say, she's not Jeffrey Epstein, but there's sure going to be protections put in place that she doesn't end up like Jeffrey Epstein. It's our understanding that her clothes and bed sheets were taken away. She's in federal lockup in Brooklyn. And her attire has now been replaced with paper clothing. What do you make of this effort to make sure there's no harm done to her or harm done to herself?
Well, I think they have to be very careful because if it happens twice in a row, they really will be put under strict scrutiny. They gave her a roommate for her cell. They made sure that she has these paper clothing so she couldn't hang herself. They have guards on the outside. They have cameras. And that's exactly what they should have done with Epstein. So I think they are making all of the correct moves, and it's something that they absolutely positively need to do in this case.
Joy, I'll give you the last word of the evening. She's hit with some pretty serious charges. Yet, are we going to see a situation if she doesn't cooperate, the SDNY maybe has further charges that they can hit her with, kind of like we saw in the college admission scandal? If you don't play ball, we're going to hit you with something even worse. Is that a possibility here?
You know, I believe so, because she has been charged with these 6 charges in connection with just a handful of victims, when we already know, based on what Epstein was charged with, that this ring is so much larger than that. So I do believe that's a possibility, and it is also likely that SDNY prosecutors are working with both carrots and sticks, because they do want her to cooperate, right? They know that she is the source of potentially so much more information, and it could potentially help implicate so many other perpetrators out there.
So many
many of whom
big names. Prince Andrew,
wealthy and
President
powerful.
Clinton, President Trump. And look, the world is going to be watching what happens next in that case. Hopefully they're watching it here on Law&Crime First. I want to thank all my guests. Have a great weekend. We will be back on Monday.